Welcome to the Hindu Daily. Based on the sources you've shared with us today, we're embarking on a deep dive that really cuts straight through some major friction points. We're looking at where global systems clash with individual human experience, everything from digital trafficking and policy disputes right down to the deep wiring of the creative brain. We're going to start with something pretty intense, this rapidly escalating humanitarian and geopolitical crisis. I'm talking about the massive forced labor and cyber scam operations coming out of Southeast Asia, which are now directly impacting India. We just saw the repatriation, didn't we, of about 500 Indian citizens. They managed to escape the notorious KK Park cybercrime hub in Mayawati, Myanmar.
That's right. And the first thing to grasp here is, well, the sheer scale of this, politically speaking. KK Park isn't just some isolated criminal den. It's a huge, sprawling, purpose-built scam city right in Kiran state. And it operates under the protection of a junta-allied border guard force, the BGF.
A border guard force run by?
Led by a warlord named Saw Chithu. He's actually been sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury specifically for his involvement in these criminal operations and forced labor.
Wow. So you've got this intersection of high-level political instability and organized crime really driving this whole thing.
Exactly. The instability from the 2021 coup basically gave these BGF partners a free hand, carte blanche, really, to expand their illicit empires.
And the junta benefits how?
Well, the junta effectively taxes these operations. It helps fund their civil war, creating this really perverse economic ecosystem.
That sounds incredibly cynical.
It leads to these moments that seem almost theatrical, but they mask the reality. For example, after a lot of U.S. congressional scrutiny, particularly over Starlink devices being used in these compounds.
Right, the satellite internet.
Yes. The Myanmar junta staged what democracy activists called a bizarre public relations stunt raid. They confiscated about 30 Starlink dishes.
Why? Was it genuine? The sources seem skeptical.
Highly skeptical. Reports suggest the criminal networks got a massive heads up. Senior staff were apparently warned beforehand.
So people were moved out.
Yes, the BGF was reportedly transporting Chinese nationals out before the raid even started. It looked like a crackdown, but really the state apparatus seems deeply complicit.
Okay, so what's the actual business model here?
Yeah.
GITOC calls them compound crime facilities.
It's terrifyingly efficient and horrifying. Victims are lured in with fake ads for high-paying IT jobs. They're trafficked across borders, passports taken away.
And then forced to work.
Forced into these industrial-scale scam operations. We're talking 12-hour workdays under the constant threat of torture, beatings, electric shocks. It's brutal.
So what kind of scams are they being forced to run? The most infamous one is this pig butchering, right, or shazupan. Can you walk us through how that actually works? It generates billions, apparently.
It does. According to UNODC estimates, it's a really insidious combination of romance fraud and investment fraud. The scammers, or the butchers as they're called.
Grim term.
Very. They spend weeks, sometimes months, fattening the pig. That means building deep trust, often faking a romantic relationship online. Then, once trust is established, they lure the victim onto a fraudulent crypto platform or some other fake investment scheme.
And they make it look real.
Oh, yes. Initial small investments often show huge fake returns. This encourages the victim, to invest more and more, sometimes their entire life savings.
Amen.
Once a massive deposit is made, the scammers vanish, they block contact, the platform disappears, they've butchered the pig, taking everything.
That's devastating. Now, you mentioned a geopolitical shift. Initially, these scams targeted Chinese citizens.
Primarily, yes. But then China tacitly supported something called Operation 127 in late 2023. It was a major offensive by ethnic armed groups against the junta, and it included crackdowns on some scam centers near the Chinese border.
So the crackdown worked.
It displaced the problem. Around 41,000 criminal suspects were handed over to China, yes, but the operations largely moved south towards the Thai border, like KK Park, and they needed new targets.
Which is where India comes in.
Precisely. The business pivoted. Scammers shifted focus aggressively onto non-Chinese victims. So now, you see, India is affected on two major fronts.
How so?
Well, firstly, India remains a significant source country for people being trafficked into these compounds to work as forced scammers. And secondly, Indian citizens themselves have become a primary target demographic for these sophisticated, high-value frauds. The crackdown didn't end the scams. It just shifted the risk and made India a new priority. It demands a whole different national strategy now.
Okay, shifting from that global tension, let's look at friction closer to home. Specifically, how centralized educational visions are clashing with state priorities. We're looking at the PM-SHRI school scheme.
Right. This is a really significant and quite contentious discussion about the future path of education in India. PMSHRI, that's Prime Minister's Schools for Rising India.
Catchy name.
It is. It's a centrally sponsored scheme aiming to upgrade over 14,500 existing government schools into sort of model institutions. The idea is they'll showcase the National Education Policy, the NEP 2020. The scale is huge. The outlay is over 27,360 crore.
And the funding is shared.
Usually, yes, on a 60.40 basis between the center and the states.
So what's the vision for these schools? On paper, it sounds quite positive, doesn't it? Experiential learning, holistic, learner-centered.
Absolutely. The goals include focusing on STEAM science, tech, engineering, arts, maths, improving ICT facilities, and emphasizing the mother tongue or local language in the early years. All sounds good.
But there's a but. Where does the controversy come in?
Well, it lies in a couple of key points of integration or maybe imposition, depending on your view. Crucially, the scheme mandates that the curriculum must include traditions and practices and Indian knowledge systems.
Okay.
And what else? And there's the stipulation that these upgraded schools must carry the PMSHRI prefix in their name. These two elements immediately sparked political resistance from several states.
Right. I remember reading that Delhi, West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala initially held out. Why? Were they just protecting their own existing models?
Partly that, yes. They signaled opposition to what they saw as central tenets of the NEP being pushed through this scheme. There were concerns about standardization and ideological direction.
Let's focus on Kerala because their situation seems particularly complex. They eventually signed the agreement, the MOU, right? Right. But then immediately paused it.
Exactly. They signed in 2024, but hit the brakes on implementation almost immediately. The key reason was objections from within their ruling coalition, specifically the CPI.
And their argument was?
They alleged a lack of proper consensus. More pointedly, they argued the NEP is being imposed as part of a broader agenda that they fear will lead to the communalization of education and potentially undermine scientific temper in schools.
So ideological friction is clear. But how did that translate into signing and then pausing? It seems counterintuitive. Surely the financial pressure played a role.
Oh, absolutely. It seems it wasn't really about sudden agreement on the policy itself. It was about financial duress.
How so?
Kerala only agreed to sign the pact after the union government made it very clear that signing was a mandatory precondition for releasing pending funds under the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan scheme.
And that was a significant amount.
Very significant.
Yeah.
Around a 558 crore was pending. So essentially they had to sign the PM-SHRI pact to secure the funding needed just to keep their existing broader education schemes running.
So sign first, secure the funds, then figure out the politics later by stalling implementation.
That appears to be the strategy. It's a classic example, really, of central policy using financial leverage to push for compliance on a scheme facing state-level resistance.
Okay, let's shift gears quite dramatically now to the future of creativity, AI, and intellectual property. Australia just made a pretty firm decision regarding big tech and copyright.
Yes, and it's a decision with potentially global ripples. The core issue is this. Should these large AI companies be allowed to scrape, essentially vacuum up, vast amounts of copyrighted material, books, music, news articles, art, to train their AI systems without getting explicit paid permission from the creators?
That's the billion-dollar question. Literally, I know Australia's Productivity Commission had recommended something different.
They did. They recommended a broad exemption to copyright laws, specifically for text and data mining. Their argument was that it would unlock significant foreign investment and boost innovation.
But the government rejected that.
Unequivocally, Attorney General Michelle Rowland made it very clear that the government would not accept that recommendation.
What was the core reasoning?
The government's stance basically is that technological innovation can't come at the cost of undermining the people and industries that actually generate culture. Rejecting that free-for-all exemption sends a strong signal. They expect fair exchange.
So they're not just saying no to AI training. They're looking for another way.
Exactly. They haven't slammed the door shut. Instead, they've set up a dedicated advisory group, the Copyright and AI Reference Group, or CARG. Its specific job is to explore alternatives and find a workable middle ground.
And what kind of alternative are they leaning towards?
The strong indication is they're actively considering a new paid licensing framework. This would move beyond the current voluntary systems, which many feel are inadequate. It would essentially mandate that AI developers need to negotiate licenses and pay for using copyrighted works in their training data.
How are creators reacting?
Very positively. Annabelle Hurd, who's the CEO of ARIO, the Australian Recording Industry Association, called the rejection of the exemption a critical step in the right direction. She framed it as a win for common sense and for creative sovereignty.
Creative sovereignty, that's a powerful term. So for our listeners, what's the bigger takeaway here? What does Australia's decision signal to other countries grappling with this?
I think the broader message is quite clear. Australia is signaling to other democracies, many wrestling with this exact same debate right now, that national innovation strategies can and should coexist with respect for creators and the economic infrastructure that sustains culture.
It's about balance, then.
Precisely. This ruling in particular aims to protect the interests of smaller players, independent artists, journalists, those who are most financially vulnerable if their work is just mined freely without compensation. It establishes a principle. Technology serves us best when it amplifies and compensates human creativity, not just when it consumes it as a free resource.
Fascinating. Okay, let's turn from national policy to a real aha moment in neuroscience. Researchers have discovered something quite surprising about when humans develop a sense of rhythm. It seems to start much, much earlier than we thought.
Yes, it's quite remarkable. Studying rhythm perception in fetuses directly is obviously very difficult. So, scientists cleverly worked around this. They studied sleeping premature newborns, specifically those around 36 weeks gestational age, so biologically very close to the final stages of fetal development. And they used a technique called FNIRS.
Right, FNIRS. Can you just quickly explain what that is for us?
Sure, it's functional near-infrared spectroscopy. Basically, it's a non-invasive way to measure brain activity. It shines near-infrared light through the scalp and detects changes in blood oxygen levels in the brain tissue underneath.
So you can see which parts of the brain are active without, say, an MRI.
Exactly. It's perfect for studying infants because they don't need to be completely still or put into a noisy machine. And the big surprise came when they looked at which brain areas lit up when these tiny infants heard rhythmic sounds.
Okay, what do they find?
Well, as expected, the auditory areas of the brain, the parts involved in hearing, became active. But remarkably, so did the brain regions that are responsible for planning and controlling movement.
Wow. So even before they can really coordinate movement properly, the movement parts of the brain are responding to rhythm.
That's the key finding. It implies that the motor system isn't just passively waiting to respond once we learn to walk or dance. It seems to be an active partner in shaping perception right from the get-go, even before birth.
Why would that be? What's the reasoning?
The researchers suggest it's because the fetus is constantly immersed in rhythms in the womb. Think about it. The mother's heartbeat, the regular cadence of her voice filtering through the amniotic fluid. This constant rhythmic environment likely helps wire this fundamental connection between hearing rhythm and preparing for movement. It shapes the brain's basic sense of timing.
So the brain is already setting itself up for the kind of synchrony we see later, like when babies start to instinctively move or bounce to music, even months later.
That seems to be the implication. One of the researchers, Dr. Makimi, really emphasized this point that this early sensitivity shows rhythm perception is like a foundational building block for learning. It helps the brain learn to detect and predict regularities in the world.
It's like the brain's first music, as the source puts it.
A lovely way to put it. And there are potential practical applications too, particularly in medicine.
How so?
Well, we know that smooth, symmetrical movements in newborns are really reliable indicators of healthy brain development and connections. These findings suggest that exposure to rhythmic sounds might actually support early synaptic growth.
By stimulating both the hearing and the motor pathways together.
Precisely. It potentially gives us another tool, or at least a better understanding, for supporting healthy neurological development right from the earliest stages.
Incredible stuff. Okay, now let's shift our focus to an infrastructure crisis, one that's very much on the ground, impacting the heart of India's tech sector. The Outer Ring Road, or ORR, corridor in Bengaluru. This specific 17.3-kilometer stretch, running from KR Puram down to Central Silk Board, sounds like it's at an absolute breaking point.
Oh, breaking point is putting it mildly. Overloaded doesn't even begin to capture it. This relatively short stretch of road supports, estimates suggest, somewhere between 8 to 10 lakh employees traveling daily.
8 to 10 lakh. That's nearly 1 million people.
Exactly. And the road itself is carrying more than double its intended capacity. We're talking about traffic volumes measured at 10,400 PCUs.
PCUs. Remind us what that stands for.
Passenger car units. It's a standard metric planners use to compare traffic flow, kind of weighting different vehicle types, like a truck counts as more than one car. The design capacity was around 4,800 PCUs.
So more than double. What does that mean for commuters?
It means commutes are agonizingly long. A journey of just 10 kilometers along that stretch during peak hours can easily take close to 2 hours. It's become legendary for its gridlock.
And this isn't a new problem, is it? It's been building for years.
Right.
What's the root cause, according to traffic police and planners?
The core issue, highlighted consistently, is a fundamental lack of a proper supporting road grid network. And linked to that, catastrophically low road density in the areas flanking the ORR.
Low road density. What does that mean practically?
Well, a healthy urban area should ideally have a road density of about 20 kilometers of road length per square kilometer of area. This allows traffic to disperse onto local streets. But the areas along the OR, especially around major tech hubs like Marathahali or Whitefield further out, they only have about 8 to 10 kilometers per square kilometer. Compare that to an older, better planned area like Gianagar, which has around 25.
So why is the density so low? A planning failure.
A major planning failure. The Bengaluru Development Authority, the BDA, essentially focused all its efforts on building the main ORR strip back in the early 2000s, but they completely neglected the crucial next step: planning and developing integrated local area layouts, residential zones, and importantly, the connecting road network around the ORR.
So everyone funneled onto the main road.
Exactly. With poor public transport options initially and no good local road network, employees commuting to the massive new tech parks had little choice but to use private vehicles, all converging onto the ORR, completely overwhelming it.
And you see the results today in specific choke points and design flaws.
Absolutely. Things like poorly designed skywalk exits that literally force pedestrians to step directly into fast-moving traffic, multiple unplanned openings in medians causing dangerous crisscrossing conflicts, bus stops located right on the main carriageway blocking lanes. It's a catalog of issues.
The police are trying short-term fixes like contraflow traffic sometimes.
Yes, they're trying tactical measures targeting specific choke points, but these are band-aids on a fundamentally flawed system.
What about longer-term, more systemic solutions? Have they been proposed?
They have, but this is where you see real resistance. For instance, the police suggested allowing public transport vehicles, like buses, to move through the large IT campuses during peak hours to bypass ORR congestion.
Seems sensible. What happened?
The IT companies reportedly refused, citing safety and security concerns within their campuses.
Okay. What about discouraging private vehicle use? Parking charges.
That was another logical proposal: levies significant parking charges inside the IT campuses to incentivize employees to switch to buses or carpooling.
And the companies.
Again, rejected by IT company representatives. This time, the stated reason was potential negative impacts on employee relations.
So realistic solutions hitting roadblocks. What does this systemic failure, this resistance, mean for Bengaluru's future mobility, especially along this critical corridor?
It means the situation is likely to remain dire for some time. Even the much-delayed infrastructure projects, like the Blue Line Metro along the ORR, which isn't expected until late 2026 now.
Even that won't be enough.
It won't be a magic bullet. BMRCL, the Metro Authority, estimates that even with the metro fully operational, somewhere between 5 to 6 lakh people will still be using private vehicles on that stretch daily. That's still far more than the road can handle.
So what's the only way out, realistically?
According to urban planners cited in the sources, the only truly effective long-term solution involves 2 difficult steps. First, a massive effort, including potentially difficult land acquisition, to retrofit a proper supporting street grid in the surrounding areas. And second, potentially revisiting those tough conversations about making IT campuses more permeable to public transport or using strong disincentives for private vehicle use. The ORR congestion isn't just a traffic jam. It's fundamentally a crisis of planning, coordination, and frankly, accountability.
Okay, let's move now from infrastructure to culture and unpack the extraordinary, often challenging, but enduring legacy of Ritwik Ghatak, described as the enfant terrible of Indian cinema.
Yes, Ghatak. He was the youngest of that legendary Bengali great trinity of filmmakers, alongside Satyajit Ray and Mrinal Sen. And he was definitely the most, shall we say, intensely personal and iconoclastic of the 3. His entire artistic output seems driven, almost consumed, by the trauma of the partition of Bengal and the resulting human displacement. It's the thread running through all his films. He was known for his uncompromising spirit, someone who, as the saying goes, burned his life on both ends.
And his influence wasn't just through his films, but also through teaching, right? His time at the Film and Television Institute of India, FTII.
Absolutely. Though his tenure as vice principal in 1963 was relatively short, it was hugely impactful. He wasn't teaching students to follow rules. He was teaching them why and how to break them meaningfully.
What kind of unconventional techniques did he champion?
Oh, many. He encouraged the deliberate use of unusual camera angles, specific wide-angle lenses for distortion, sometimes harsh, non-naturalistic lighting. He famously used jarring jump cuts long before they were fashionable, and he consciously violated the imaginary line rule of continuity editing. For him, these weren't mistakes. They were tools to create specific emotional or psychological effects.
And the sources really emphasize his approach to sound. It wasn't just background noise for him.
Not at all. He truly elevated sound design. He saw sound as a co-equal partner to the visual image, sometimes even more important. His soundtracks are incredibly complex, layered, often using suggestive, symbolic sounds rather than just realistic ones. He composed sound to elicit a direct, powerful, often deeply unsettling dramatic impact. It was groundbreaking for Indian cinema at the time.
Now, there's often this perception of rivalry or antagonism between Ghatak and Satyajit Ray. Was that accurate?
Largely inaccurate, actually. It seems more like a myth built up over time. The reality is, Ray deeply respected Ghatak's talent. Ray secretly recommended Ghatak for the FTII job, and he once famously said Ghatak was someone who had cinema running in his veins. They had different approaches, different temperaments, but there was mutual recognition of genius.
And Ghatak's own genius, perhaps, lay in taking something often dismissed melodrama and turning it into high art.
That's a key insight, yes. He embraced heightened emotion, excessive plots, stories full of suffering, and coincidence, the stuff of melodrama. Think of Nita's relentless suffering in Megadakatara, the cloud-capped star, or the almost unbearable chain of tragic events in Subarnarika, the golden thread. But he used these melodramatic structures not for cheap sentiment, but to explore profound themes. Partition trauma, the loss of identity, the struggles of refugees, the breakdown of society. He made melodrama epic and political.
And it's this very quality, isn't it, this embrace of heightened emotion and dramatic plotting that connects him, perhaps surprisingly, to popular Hindi cinema. His legacy isn't just in art films.
Absolutely not. His direct footprint on Bollywood is deeper and more direct than many realize, largely through his influence on students at FTII who went on to become major mainstream directors.
Can you give us some examples?
Well, on a very foundational level, Ghatak actually pioneered one of Bollywood's most enduring and popular tropes. The reincarnation love story. He wrote the original story for Bimal Roy's classic 1958 film, Madhumati.
No kidding. Madhumati came from Ghatak.
The story did, yes. And then you see specific techniques echoing down through filmmakers who studied or were influenced by his FTII era, like Sanjay Leela Bhansali and Vidhu Vinod Chopra.
How's it with Bhansali, for instance?
Think about Bhansali's very distinct use of sound, particularly that recurring whip crack sound effect in films like Devdas. That's not just random drama, it's widely seen as a direct homage, almost a quote, from Ghatak's Megadakatara, where the whip sound becomes the psychological motif and auditory symbol of Nita's inner torment and suffering. Bhansali adopts that kind of psychological sound coding.
Fascinating. And Vidhu Vinod Chopra.
Chopra often explores themes of childhood bonds, particularly friends who grow up together and later become entangled in grand, often tragic, love stories or conflicts. You see it in Parinda, in Mission Kashmir. That deep focus on the formative power and tragic potential of childhood relationships echoes the central relationship between the siblings in Ghatak's Subarnarika. So yes, his legacy is very much alive, woven into the fabric of popular Hindi cinema, far beyond his difficult artist reputation.
Finally, let's turn to literature and Kiran Desai's highly anticipated first novel in nearly 2 decades, The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny.
Yes, quite an event in the literary world. And the first thing that strikes you is the sheer scale of it, nearly 700 pages. Apparently, it was written over the course of those 2 decades.
That's incredible dedication. How does Desai describe managing such a long, complex project?
She talked about the editing process being almost intuitive. Her main focus, she said, was ensuring that the significant mood shifts within this vast narrative actually worked, that they felt cohesive despite the scope.
And the novel seems built around a central tension, almost a dialogue between 2 literary traditions, represented by what the main characters are reading.
Exactly. You have Sonia, who is reading Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, the epitome of sweeping social realism. And then you have Sunny, who is reading Juan Rulfo's Pedro Paramo, which is a foundational text of magical realism. This tension between realism and something more, ethereal or supernatural, seems core to the book.
Did Desai always plan for this blend?
Interestingly, no. She said she initially set out to write a completely realistic novel, but as she delved deeper, especially into the complexities and darkness she wanted to explore, she realized she needed what she calls the hallucinatory or even demonic element.
Why? What did that add?
She felt that strict realism or even modern psychology was simply too constrained. It couldn't fully encompass the entire human experience, particularly the kind of profound evil or historical trauma she wanted to depict. She needed a wider lens.
Let's connect this to that phrase she uses, the ocean of demons, that she suggests underlies the book's structure. What does that mean?
Well, the novel features a truly menacing villain, Ilan de Tourgenfoss. Desai is clear he's not just meant to be an art monster or a psychologically disturbed individual in the usual sense. She describes him as a personification of evil. To grapple with that kind of figure, she felt she had to look beyond the typical frameworks of the modern novel. She speaks about admitting the presence of an unseen world, almost a mythic dimension, that provides the underlying structure and allows her to explore human darkness and historical violence more profoundly.
But alongside this demonic element, the novel also seems deeply engaged with history, acting as a kind of museum of a past India.
Yes, it definitely traces a historical arc. It contrasts the grandparents' generation seemingly more secular, perhaps trying to shed rigid identities in the post-independence era, with the subsequent unraveling or challenging of those values in contemporary times.
Is she nostalgic for that past?
She addresses that directly. She says, there are uses for nostalgia, suggesting it's valuable to look back, but only if you're also willing to confront the darker aspects, the complexities and contradictions of that history. It's not a simple, rosy view. It's a critical engagement with the past, wrapped in this unique blend of realism and, well, magic or myth.
And this complexity seems to mirror her own personal experience too, doesn't it? Living in the U.S. for so long.
Yes, she mentioned having moved to the U.S. when she was just a teenager. She described feeling, in some ways, like a person without a country. Yet she remains mystified, she says, by the powerful, enduring hold that India continues to have on her imagination, driving her to write this vast, complex novel about it after all this time.
It sounds like the writing itself is perhaps her way of navigating that connection, mapping that imaginative territory.
That's certainly one way to read it, exploring that mystifying connection through both the concrete details of realism and the necessary, perhaps unsettling presence of the demonic or the unseen.
We hope this deep dive into today's sources has given you plenty to think about. Whether you are contemplating the moral economy of AI, the infrastructure challenges straining major cities, or the complexity of human creativity, from the rhythmic brain connections of a premature infant to the layered genius of Ritwik Ghatak. We encourage you to keep exploring the connections between these disparate fields.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.